And so apostasy is divided into three categories: apostate beliefs, apostate actions, and apostate sayings. So we are now discussing, or we were discussing in the previous class, the apostate actions. So the author gave an example. He said, like prostrating to an idol. So what does that mean, like prostrating to an idol? Yani someone who makes sujood to a statue or something of the like that the non-Muslim worships. So this is called prostrating to an idol. So it doesn't have to be necessarily a statue, but something that the non-Muslim worships that is an idol. So just by doing that, the person exits from Islam, even if they don't believe, or even if they don't intend to worship that thing. So if somebody makes sujood to a statue, if somebody makes sujood to a tree, if somebody makes sujood to the fire, if somebody makes sujood to a jinn, if somebody makes sujood to the shaitan, if somebody makes sujood to the sun or the moon, they exit from Islam even if they did not intend to worship that thing. Now we said prostrating to a human with the intention of worshiping, that would take the person out of Islam. So if someone makes sujood to a human being, here the case has some details. So for the human being specifically, it has details, which is if the person prostrated, made sujood to the human being with the intention of worship, then here we say they blasphemed. If they made sujood to a human being without the intention of worship, their intention or the reason that they made the sujood to the person was out of honoring or salutation or greeting, but not out of worship, then they don't blaspheme. And we have the evidence for this, which is that one of the great companions, his name is Mu'adh ibn Jabal, he was in Rome, and then he came back to the city of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and when he saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what did he do? He made sujood to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he prostrated to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what was his immediate reaction? Did he say, "You're an idol worshipper, don't worship me, this is shirk, this is blasphemy"? Did he say that? No. His first reaction was, "Ma hadha." He asked him, "What is this?" And so then Mu'adh ibn Jabal began to explain the situation. And he said that when he was in Rome, he noticed that the Romans would make sujood to their generals and to their religious, what they call priests. So Mu'adh ibn Jabal, he knows that those people, they're not deserving of that because they're kuffar and they're bad people, they're evil people. So Mu'adh ibn Jabal, he said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "You're more deserving of that gesture of respect and salutation than they are." And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "La taf'al. لو كنت آمر أحدا أن يسجد لأحد لأمرت المرأة أن تسجد لزوجها لأمرت المرأة أن تسجد لزوجها." So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Don't do it." So this is a prohibition. He said to Mu'adh ibn Jabal, "Don't do that act." And so that was a forbiddance. He was ordering him to leave it out in an obligatory way, meaning it's forbidden, it's sinful. Because in the law that was revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's haram, forbidden, for one human to make sujood to another human out of respect or salutation or honoring, without the intention of worshipping. But in the previous nations, it was permissible to do. As we know from the story of Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, and as we know about the story of Prophet Adam alayhi salam, when Allah Ta'ala ordered the angels to make sujood to Prophet Adam alayhi salam out of greeting, salutation, and respect, not out of worship, of course. But in the Sharia, the law revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it is not permissible for one human to make sujood to another out of respect or salutation, even if it's without the intention of worship. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ, he gave a judgment, and he gave an extra benefit to Mu'adh ibn Jabal that's related to this. He said, were I to order anybody to make sujood to anybody else, I would have ordered the woman to make sujood to her husband. So this shows the great status that the husband has. Of course, it doesn't mean that the wife is the slave of the husband, no. And of course, it does not mean that the wife is obligated to obey the husband in every single thing, literally, no. Rather, this hadith goes to show the high status of the husband and how the husband should be treated. Yani the respect and reverence and the place that the wife should have for her husband in her heart, and how she should act towards him. But the Prophet ﷺ made it clear that what Mu'adh ibn Jabal did was forbidden. And he did not judge him as a kafir for merely prostrating to the Prophet ﷺ, because the Prophet ﷺ knows or knew that Mu'adh ibn Jabal was not making sujood to him out of worship. So the judgment is known from that. So if one human makes sujood to another human without the intention of worship, we don't judge him as a kafir. But if he does have the intention of worship, then he is judged as a kafir, of course. In the case of other than the human, we don't look at their intention. Just by them making sujood to a person, to other than a person, yani like the sun or the moon or a statue, then that person is judged as a kafir automatically, even if they say, I wasn't worshipping it. And by that we conclude the second category of apostasy, which is apostate actions. Now we are going to the third category of apostasy, which is the apostate sayings, which are too many to be counted by us. And because it is a fact that most of the sins that the human being commits is with their tongue. And as you can see nowadays, most people, they just like to let their tongue loose and make their tongue move. And as the youth say these days, a lot of people, they just like to yap. And that's all that they do. And they move their tongue and they say things that are not beneficial. So the Prophet ﷺ told us, أَكْثَرُ خَطَايَ بَنِي آدَمَ مِنْ لِسَانِهِ, which means the majority of sins that is committed by the human is from his tongue. So the amount of things that a person can say and the possible combination of words that a person can have is something that mathematically we can't even fathom. So that's why the author said, which are too many to be counted by us. And the things that the person might say or says that takes them out of Islam is very numerous. It's a huge number. So it's not, and it goes to show that the person should be careful with what they speak. So the first example, and so we're going to give a list of examples. And so just so you know, these aren't the only examples. That's the point. It's not the only examples. It's not restricted to only these examples. And these examples, they all go back to certain rules in the Islamic law. And we can learn these rules and learn how to apply these rules so that we don't have to, let's say, panic if we hear somebody say something that is disturbing. But you're going to see these statements are disturbing. And for example, you and me and someone who is educated in Islam, someone who they care about their deen, someone who's not reckless with their deen, someone who fears Allah, someone who doesn't want to go to hell, someone who takes the deen seriously, he's not going to say this stuff. The people that say these things are reckless, arrogant, vile, people that they are not giving the proper consideration to the state of accountability. The fact that they're accountable for what they say, the fact that there's two angels, Raqib and Atid, that are recording everything that you do, even what you do in the bathroom, even though they don't go inside. The one who isn't really taking that into consideration in the proper way, the one who's just saying whatever and doing whatever, that's the person that says these things, not someone who cares about their deen. So don't worry about thinking that, oh, what did I say, or this or that. You're not someone that, let's say, is reckless with their deen. So you wouldn't dare to say something that contradicts the religion or mocks the religion, or is something that mocks a well-known practice in Islam, which we're going to see the examples. So when I'm mentioning these examples, they're just so that you understand that these are things that people have actually said, and the judgment of it is kufr. That these things take the person out of Islam. So that if you, let's say, you come across one of those reckless people and you hear them say that statement, and you think that Allah Ta'ala will have mercy on him, on that person, if you advise them, so you know the judgment, you can tell them, you can teach them. Or for yourself, if there was a time in your life when you did not adhere to the religious rules and you said a lot of things, and then you learn that such and such statement is blasphemy, and then you can know that if you did that in the past, then you have to rectify the situation, etc. So you would be saved. And because the one who is living in ignorance, he's in the darkness and he won't know. But when you get the knowledge, it's like a light that illuminates everything around you, so you can identify, oh, I said that in the past, I need to fix myself. Instead of going throughout your whole life thinking that you're Muslim and then coming to the end of your life being surprised by the angel of death calling you an enemy of Allah. So this is a mercy from Allah that you learn these things. So the first example is to say to a Muslim, O Kafir, O Jew, O Christian, or O you without religion, provided that the meaning intended by the speaker is that the religion of the addressed person is kufr, Judaism, Christianity, or not a religion, then these expressions are apostasy and kufr. So here, if the person is being literal, if he calls a Muslim a Jew literally, then literally he's calling Islam Judaism, which is kufr, because Judaism has a different creed, they have a blasphemous creed. So here, the one who commits kufr by this is the one who calls a Muslim these things literally. That's the one who blasphemes. Then he said, however, if one says such words to a Muslim and did not intend the apparent meaning of the expressions, but with the purpose of likening him to those non-Muslims in behavior, meaning that the addressed Muslim resembles the kafir in his mean acts, or that he treats the Muslims like the kafir treats Muslims, then it is not kufr, but it is an enormous sin. So in the case when it's not literal, he doesn't literally mean that he's literally a Jew. He's saying you're like a Jew. So he's using metaphor and calling the Muslim a Jew with the intention of saying you're similar to a Jew. You act like a Jew. You do the things that a Jew does, the ugly things that a Jew does. Or he tells them, oh, you Christian. And he wants to say by that, and he understands from that, and he means by that, you're like a Christian. You act like a Christian. You do the things that a Christian does. Or he says, oh, you without a religion, you act like the one who has no religion. In this case, we say it's not kufr, because what he's doing is he is using, drawing similarity between him because of those bad actions that the Muslim does. However, it is still an enormous sin. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ said, سِبَابُ الْمُسْلِمِ فُسُوقٌ وَقِتَالُهُ كُفْرٌ. سِبَابُ الْمُسْلِمِ فُسُوقٌ means insulting the Muslim is fusuq. Fusuq means, you can say, wickedness, a state of an enormous sin. It's an enormous sin. وَقِتَالُهُ كُفْرٌ. The Prophet ﷺ, he used the word kufr in this hadith to emphasize the severity of killing the Muslim unjustly. And he didn't literally mean that if you kill a Muslim, you exit from Islam just by that. Rather, he used the word kufr to show the severity, how big of an enormous sin it is to kill a Muslim. Because he said insulting a Muslim is an enormous sin, so how about killing him? He used the word kufr to show the severity of it, not meaning that if you kill a Muslim, you exit from Islam. So you would think to yourself, why would a Muslim really insult another Muslim? Would a Muslim really say something bad? Of course. Don't many Muslims nowadays, they do it all day long, especially with words that they think are playful words. Like nowadays, there is a popular word that the young people use. I forget what generation it is. I don't know if it's generation Alpha now. But the young people, right? People that are like teenagers now, or people that are like in their early 20s now. You know, this generation, whatever that is. They say this word, and it's a bad word. It's originally taken from another bad word that originally means what? Fornicator. So this word is H-U-Z-Z. This word comes from another word, which is H-O-E-S. And that word means fornicator. And it originally means fornicator. So you cannot call a Muslim female an H-U-Z-Z. Or it's not specific to gender. They sometimes use it for the males as well, but you cannot call a male Muslim an H-U-Z-Z. Because originally it's from H-O-E-S, and H-O-E-S is originally fornicator. And that's an enormous sin. Not only is it an insult, which is an enormous sin itself, but that's the enormous sin of accusing a Muslim of fornication without evidence, which carries a religious penalty. So if there was a caliph nowadays, and you got convicted of that, you would get 80 lashes for calling a Muslim a fornicator without evidence. So, and I warn against this word. Don't use this word with each other, with Muslims. Don't call Muslims that word. And likewise goes for C-H-U-Z-Z, because sometimes that is also used. And that's like a double insult, because I guess that means that they're ugly, so that's adding more insult to an insult. So that's, just don't do that, yani. The next example, to mock one of the names of Allah Ta'ala, His promise of paradise and the enjoyment therein, or His threat of hellfire and torture, by a person who is not ignorant that these matters, that is, the name, promise, or threat that one mocked, are confirmed by Allah. Like the statement said by some vile people, which is blasphemy, tomorrow we will be cozy warm in the fire of hell, as it entails mocking the religion and belying the Qur'an. So, like I told you in the beginning, one of us that like learned or cares about his hereafter, or cares about his deen, he's never going to say, I'm going to go warm up in hell, na'udhu billah. This is an extreme level of arrogance and recklessness and just not caring about the deen. So this statement, it makes it clear about the rule that the person who mocks something that is known, that it is praised in the deen, or something, or they make light of something that the religion considers severe, and they know that that's the case, that person exits from Islam. So what are we going to have coming up soon? Eidul Adha. And what do many people do during that time? They make certain memes that mock and make fun of the slaughtering of the sheep. So got to be careful with that. Depending on how the meme is and what its the connotation is, if they're making fun of slaughtering, this is kufr. Because slaughtering for Eidul Adha is an emphasized recommended act. So don't take, what's the case? And the case is the world has deteriorated, and many people, they just don't care about many things, and they do many things that are reckless and destructive and wild, and they don't care, and it's become like people have normalized that amongst themselves, and even that has happened, or that effect has also come over to the Muslim nation. So there's many people that identify as Muslims. They throw caution to the wind. They don't and they do things that Muslims, let's say 100 years ago, would never dare to do. But the shame has gotten less, and the caring about the hereafter has gotten less, and the attachment to the worldly life has gotten more, and ignorance has gotten more, to the extent where people just do wild and crazy stuff. They blaspheme, and they don't even know it. Because, let's say they mock something in Islam, and they think that it's just a joke, but they exit from Islam. To say with the intent to belittle the command of Allah, if Allah ordered me with such a matter, I would not do it. Or to say out of belittlement of the Qibla, if the Qibla were changed to another direction, I would not pray towards it. Or to say, if Allah gave me paradise, I would not enter it, with belittlement or demonstrating obstinacy against the religion in all these cases. However, if they were not said out of belittlement, stubbornness, or belying the religion, then it is not kufr. So the case goes like that. If someone said that statement, not with the intention of belittling, not with the intention of stubbornness, not out of belying the religion, then this person does not blaspheme. But if it was with those things, if it was with belittlement, stubbornness, or belying the religion, this person blasphemes. They exit from Islam. Amongst the blasphemous statements is for a sick person to say, after another ordered him to pray, if Allah punishes me for leaving out prayers despite my sickness, He would be unjust to me. He becomes a kafir because he attributed injustice to Allah. And that's obvious. Whoever says that Allah commits injustice to them, of course that person blasphemes. So, if the person is sick, as long as he's conscious, he has to pray. So let's say if he's sick and he can't get up, he prays sitting down. If he's sick and he can't sit down, he prays lying down. If he can lie down on his side and have his chest towards the Qibla, he does it. If he can't, he lies on his back. If he can, let's say, lift the upper part of his body and do the movements like for sujood and ruku' as much as he can, he does that. If not, he just lies flat on his back. And what does he do? He uses his eyelashes, his eyebrows, his eyelashes. He closes them a little bit for ruku' and he closes them a little bit more for sujood. If he can't move his eyelashes, or let's say his eyes are closed, but his heart is awake and he's conscious, then he just imagines himself praying. That he says, for example, right now I'm saying Allahu Akbar to enter into the prayer. Right now I'm reciting Al-Fatiha, and he visualizes himself doing that. Right now I'm going to ruku', or right now as long as you're conscious. If you're unconscious, then the pen is lifted. You don't got to worry. But even if you're sick, even if you're in pain, even if you're a pregnant woman going through labor, and if you can't stand, you can't stand. You can sit. But just because you're going through labor and you have IVs inside of you, that doesn't mean you let the prayer time go out. So that's how the educated Muslim, the Muslim who is centered in their deen, who wants to make sure that they're safe in the hereafter, and they live their life like that. They think about like, how am I going to make this easier for myself if I need to pray? And so they think like that. But for the person who is sick, when somebody tells them to go pray, just because you're going through pain, just because you're sick, doesn't mean you get to leave out the prayer. So if you tell the person to pray while they're sick and they say, because for them they're saying, oh, I'm sick, so I don't have to pray, or I'm sick, so, God will, according to them, let me slide. Na'udhu billah. But then that person goes beyond the bounds and says, if God were to punish me for while I'm sick and I don't pray, then He would be unjust to me. Then that person blasphemes. Na'udhu billah. Likewise, anybody who attributes injustice to Allah. Because injustice is a defect. Injustice is a deficiency. Injustice is not befitting to Allah. Likewise is blasphemy if someone says about something that happened in this world, this happened without the predestining of Allah, whether that thing that happened was good or evil. Yani, if somebody says about anything that happens in this universe, it happened without the will of Allah, they exit from Islam. Would any educated Muslim say that? No. Who would say that? Yani, someone who is reckless and careless and has a bad belief. To say, if the prophets or the angels or the Muslims testified before me about something I would not accept from them, that is, one does not believe them, then one becomes a kafir for belying the known religious texts. But also for any discrediting all the angels. Like, who would exaggerate and say, if all the angels told me something, I wouldn't believe them? Na'udhu billah. What kind of crazy person is this? Not only that, he says, if the prophets and the angels and all the Muslims, they told me about something, I would not accept it from them. I would reject it. Na'udhu billah. How sick and arrogant do you have to be to say such a thing? To say, after another has ordered one to do a sunnah, like using the siwak, I will not do so-and-so, even if it is a recommended matter sunnah, with the purpose of mockery. Then one becomes a kafir. However, if one did not intend mockery or the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, then one does not become a kafir. So this one's an easy one to visualize. Let's say somebody comes to you and says, here's a siwak, you use it throughout the day, etc. It's convenient, you keep it in your pocket. And that person says, I will not do that, even though it is sunnah. Like they say with mockery, they say it with making fun of it, degrading it. They blaspheme, of course, because they're making fun of this recommended matter that's known to be sunnah. But if they're just saying, without mocking it, they're just saying, I brush my teeth at night, let's say before I go to sleep, and in the morning when I wake up, I'm not going to use the siwak. They're just merely stating they're not going to use it. They're not mocking it. They're not belittling it. They're not making fun of it. Then here it's not kufr, because they're just saying, I'm not going to use the siwak, and you're not obligated to use the siwak. So this goes for any sunnah, right? So your Muslim brother who Allah Ta'ala put some special blessings in his heart, so now he changed his life and he seeks the knowledge and he wants to adhere to all the sunnah. He let his beard grow, he's wearing thobes every day, using the siwak, wearing a turban. So he comes to you and says, brother, let's start wearing turbans. He's trying to encourage you. And then you tell him, no, I'm not going to do it. And then he tells you, but it's sunnah to do it. He's like, even if it's sunnah, I'm just not going to wear it. He's just saying he's not going to wear it. That's not kufr. Because he's not mocking, belittling, degrading. He's just saying, I'm not going to wear it. There's no issue with that, except that he would not be doing what's ideal. He will be doing something that, and he is missing out on reward. So it is blameworthy from that sense. But it's not sinful. Okay, طيب. Next page. To say about one's enemy, for example, if this person were a prophet, I would not believe in him. Then one becomes a kafir for mocking the office of prophethood that this statement implies. Because basically what he's saying is, I don't give the status of prophethood the respect it deserves. So that's why the person blasphemes there. To say when a scholar gives a religious judgment, fatwa, what is this law, shara', with the purpose of belittling the judgment of the Islamic law and objecting to it, then one becomes a kafir. However, if the scholar gave this person a judgment which he deems false and against the religion, consequently objecting to it as if to say, what are these words that you claim to be part of the religion of Allah when they are not? Then he does not become a kafir. So there's two different contexts, two different meanings. In one case you have a person who they're talking down on the religion, on the actual judgment of the religion. They're like trying to say, what's this? Like, this is something that should be dismissed or ignored or put down. They blaspheme for that. But if someone, they give a false religious judgment or something that is completely not associated to Islam, and they say, what is this law you're talking about? Meaning, what you're saying is not the Islamic law. In this case, they don't blaspheme. Next is, if the person says, may Allah's dam be upon every religious scholar, intending comprehensiveness, that is, generalizing it to all religious scholars. As a result, the speaker becomes a kafir. However, if one did not intend to include all of the religious scholars, but meant specific ones, and this statement was said within a context which indicates that intended meaning, such as if he had mentioned the corrupt scholars of his time, and then he said that statement while meaning these specific scholars, because of what he believes of their corrupt condition, then one would not become a kafir. However, this statement is not clear of sin. That is, it is sinful, yani that person commits a sin. But if there was no context indicating his intention of specification, then he becomes a kafir, even if he says, I meant the scholars of my time. And this is an important rule. Again, like we said, many people nowadays, they just go loose with their tongue. They don't restrict their tongue. They don't think about the consequences of what they're saying. They just talk and talk and talk, and they say very strange things. So if what they're saying is a generalization, and that generalization happens to be, let's say, contradicting the religion or belittling a prophet or something like that, the person blasphemes. Except, right, there's an exception, except if the person, because of something else, whether it was a word that somebody said, or whether it was a circumstance, right, the situation, there was what people call a context clue that shows that this person is saying, even though the statement itself is general, but he means it within this specific context. If that existed, that context clue existed, and it was that person's intention that he doesn't mean generally, in this case he doesn't blaspheme, and he's saved from blasphemy, but he is not saved from the sin. And though this example that the author gave is a perfect example, if there were people talking, there were Muslims talking, and they were mentioning about the state of the Muslim world today, that you have these people who they portray the image of a sheikh, and they are perceived to be people of knowledge, but in reality they're wolves in sheep's clothing. They're spreading poison and misinformation and misguidance in the name of Islam, and because they might have a talent for articulation, or they might be charismatic, they have a large platform with a large following, but everything that they say, or the things that they say, are evil and misguided, and whoever believes it will blaspheme. So they're talking about the situation, how these people are so-called scholars and they are corrupt and they are not doing what they're supposed to do, etc. This is the conversation that's happening in a group of people. And then so within that conversation, one person says, may God's dam be upon all the scholars. But when he said that, he meant what we're talking about in this conversation. And these corrupt scholars that exist now. If those two things are put together, his intention of meaning what we're talking about and the context clue, they exist together, then in this case the person is saved from blasphemy, not saved from the sin. So that applies to all the general statements. So among the general statements that people say, na'udhu billah, which are blasphemous, and according to these details, is like how some people say all men are dogs. Na'udhu billah. This is a blasphemous statement, explicit blasphemous statement, because among the men are prophets. And of course to call a prophet a dog is blasphemous. So except if the person, he falls under this rule. There was a context, clue. They didn't literally mean all men. They meant all men that do this, or all men that, we're talking about here, or all men from, let's say, of a certain time, etc. And something that, like this example, that it restricts the statement in a way that the meaning is not blasphemous. In that case, they don't blaspheme, but they're sinful. So be careful what you say. To say, I do not acknowledge Allah, the angels, or the Prophet, meaning our Master Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or any other Prophet revealed, or any other Prophet, okay. Or to say, I do not acknowledge the Islamic law, shara', that Allah revealed to His Prophet. Or to say, I do not acknowledge Islam. This person is a kafir. Yani, of course, whoever says he doesn't acknowledge Islam, then and Islam judges him as a kafir. This person would not be a Muslim. To say, after a person said to one, why did you do this prohibition? Do you not know the judgment? If he says, I do not know the judgment, while mocking the judgment revealed by Allah, such a person is a kafir and an apostate, because he is mocking. And remember, this is with the intention of mocking. To mention an ayah with the intention of belittling its meaning, like to say ayah 34 of Surah An-Naba, وَكَأْسًا دِهَاقًا, after one has filled a cup with a drink with the intention of belittling it or disbelieving in what Allah promised the believers in paradise, that they will have a glass filled with pleasant drink, this person becomes a kafir. Yani, of course, anyone who recites a verse of the Quran with the intention of belittling its meaning, or belittling it, by their recitation of that ayah out of place, they blaspheme, of course, because they're degrading it, they're mocking it, they're putting it down. So imagine someone pouring a glass of alcohol, vodka, na'udhu billah, or wine, na'udhu billah. And as they're pouring it, they recite this ayah, na'udhu billah. وَكَأْسًا دِهَاقًا. Why are they doing that? To degrade, to put that down, to put it down. They blaspheme. Na'udhu billah. Pouring alcohol and reciting an ayah of the Quran, na'udhu billah. That would be blasphemous. And meaning, like, they're referencing an ayah that's talking about the drinks in paradise that the Muslims will have that will be filled to the brim. So this person is making fun of that ayah by saying it while he is filling up a glass with khamr, with alcohol. Na'udhu billah. Of course they blaspheme. Or to say ayah 20 of Surah An-Naba, فَكَانَتْ سَرَابًا, after one has emptied a drink from a container with the purpose of belittling it, this person becomes a kafir. So that person that poured the alcohol, he now drinks it, he finishes it, and so he recites that ayah that's referring to the mountains basically disappearing. So with the intention of belittling, they blaspheme. Now, the mountains will vanish on Judgment Day as if they were a mirage. Everybody knows what a mirage is? Everybody? Yeah, so it's like, that's a description of what the mountains will look like on Judgment Day. They'll look like a mirage. So that person, he finishes the drink, the alcohol, and he recites that ayah out of belittling. Of course it's kufr. Or to say ayah 3 of Surah Al-Mutaffifin, وَإِذَا كَالُوهُمْ أَوْ وَزَنُوهُمْ يُخْسِرُونَ, upon weighing or measuring out of belittling it, such as if he meant that the saying of Allah and His threat have no value in his heart, this person becomes a kafir. So again, here with the intention of belittling the meaning of the ayah. Because the ayah is talking about those that they cheat while they are selling by weight or measure or count. And these people are like scammers. They're scammers. Basically, so let's say somebody's trying to sell you a pound of rice, right? And they have a container that supposedly, if you fill that container up, it's a pound of rice. But what do? From the bottom of the container, they indent it so that there's space inside, some of the space inside of the container gets taken up by the bump or the dent. So you're not getting a full pound, but it just looks like it is. Or if they're using a scale to weigh it, what do? They do something to the scale that makes you think that you're getting a pound's worth, but in reality you're not. So that's what the ayah is referring to. So this person, if he's buying and selling and he recites this ayah with the intention of belittling the meaning, yani what this ayah is referring to, then he blasphemes. Or to say ayah 47, Surah Al-Kahf, وَحَشَرْنَاهُمْ فَلَمْ نُغَادِرْ مِنْهُمْ أَحَدًا. When seeing a crowd out of belittling it, this person becomes a kafir. So a person walks into a stadium or he walks into wherever and he sees a huge ocean of people. So he recites this ayah not out of amazement and wonderment and how this crowd, for example, compared to the crowd of people on Judgment Day is like nothing, and this really impacted his heart and he wanted to recite the ayah to glorify Allah. No. Instead, he saw the crowd and he wanted to recite the ayah to make fun of the ayah. He blasphemes. If one quotes the ayahs of the Qur'an, such as quoting them in the above scenarios, without the intention of belittlement, one does not become a kafir. Nonetheless, this is prohibited, as Shaykh Ahmad ibn Hajar said. This is not far from being prohibited. That is, saying it is prohibited is credible, and it is the preponderant position because it entails the lack of proper etiquette with the Qur'an. And it's not good manners with the Qur'an, it's not the good etiquette with the Qur'an to recite the verses of the Qur'an out of their place, even if it was not with belittlement. With belittlement, it's kufr, for sure. With no belittlement or with no mocking, with no degrading, with no putting down, it's a sin, because we're obligated to honor the Qur'an. And among the ways that we honor it and glorify it is that we don't, let's say, mention it out of context. Likewise, a person becomes a kafir if he cusses a prophet or an angel, like Jibreel, Azra'il, Munkar, Nakir, or any of the honorable angels of Allah. Who would curse an angel? Like I told you in the beginning, we're educated Muslims, and if we care about our deen, would you curse an angel? Like, if a Muslim cares about his deen, you wouldn't even curse another Muslim, a human being. Imagine if someone curses Angel Jibreel, alayhi salam, or someone curses the angel of death, Azra'il, alayhi salam, or somebody curses any angel, na'udhu billah, while knowing they're an angel. Subhanallah. So we wouldn't say such a thing. Or if he says, I would be a pimp if I perform prayer. This statement mocks the prayer and demeans it. The pimp is a person who brings customers to fornicators. So, of course, in Western culture, or in some any subcultures of Western culture, some people think being a pimp is a cool thing, or some people think of a pimp as something to aspire to, na'udhu billah. But in other cultures, it's one of the most disgraceful things that you can be, is a pimp. Because the pimp, he brings the customers for the fornicators. So it's a disgraceful thing. In the West, since they are mostly a society that is immersed in vileness and sexual perversion, to them, the more people you fornicate with, the cooler you are, or the greater you are, or stuff like that, na'udhu billah. But in other cultures, when you act like a lowlife, it's a disgrace. And so people, they take that as a disgrace. Like even people that, let's say, are sinners, they don't want to be accused of being a lowlife. So being accused, or calling something, or saying about yourself that you would be a pimp if you did such and such a thing, that means you're saying about that thing that is one of the worst things, or one of the things that they're degrading. The person is degrading that thing. And so basically the person is saying, I would be a vile, disgraceful individual if I prayed. Na'udhu billah. That's not the case. And the one who prays, he is blessed. The one who prays, and the obligatory prayer, he is praised. The one who prays is elevated by Allah. The one who prays, he has the guarantee from Allah that he will enter paradise. How could someone say, I would be a lowlife if I started praying? Na'udhu billah. What kind of person would say such a thing? Not us. And not a Muslim who's educated. Na'udhu billah. From such a statement. Or to say, nothing good has happened to me since I started praying, because it contains belittlement of the prayer. Or to say, after a person, for example, ordered one to pray, prayer is not proper for me, with the purpose of mockery. This is kufr. However, if a menstruating woman said so, with the meaning that the prayer is not valid from her while menstruating, she does not fall into kufr. So again, it's about the meaning. What is the person trying to say? Is it legitimately a Muslim sister who's bleeding and she's on her period? So for sure she can't pray, because it's number one, it's forbidden. It wouldn't be valid for her to do the prayer while she's bleeding. So if she said, prayer is not proper for me, she's right. Because while she's on her period, prayer is not proper for her. But if someone says prayer is not proper for me, and they're making fun of the prayer, na'udhu billah, they blaspheme. Or to say to a Muslim, I am your enemy and the enemy of your Prophet, na'udhu billah. This is blasphemy, since it contains belittlement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So of course, if someone insults the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, belittles the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he says something bad about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they blaspheme. You can't be a Muslim if you insult the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You can't be a Muslim if you say you're the enemy of a Prophet. Na'udhu billah. Subhanallah. Who would say such a thing? Or to say to a descendant of the Prophet, a Sharif, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I am your enemy and the enemy of your grandfather, meaning the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is kufr. However, if he meant a closer grandfather of that person, then it is not kufr. Yes, there are still amongst us today people, Muslims, that they trace their lineage back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and so they have the blood of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the bloodline of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if someone says, I am the enemy of your grandfather, and he means by that great grandfather, and he meaning the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of course that person blasphemes. But if he meant the father of your father, your direct grandfather, in that case he doesn't blaspheme, because he's just talking about a regular Muslim. But it's sinful though, Or to say anything similar to those aforementioned abhorrent and ugly words is kufr. May Allah protect us from them. Any example, any words that are similar to the ones that we mentioned, the examples, whoever says them voluntarily blasphemes, exits from Islam, and he's obligated to return to Islam by saying the two shahadas. A large number of jurists, scholars of Islamic law, of the four schools, like the Hanafi faqih, Badr al-Rashid, who lived in the 8th century and authored a treatise, a small book or booklet, in presenting certain expressions that nullify Islam. And the Maliki judge, Iyad, who lived in the 6th century, in his book Ash-Shifa, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy upon both of them, enumerated many things that pertain to these issues, namely kufr beliefs, acts and sayings, after they occurred in their time, in order to warn people against them, which one is urged to look at, because whoever does not know evil is more likely to fall into it. And if you don't know something's bad, what's going to stop you from doing it? If you said, I want to do this thing, and you didn't know it was bad, what's going to stop you from doing it? If you want to do it, you got the intention to do it, you got the urge to do it, you got the want to do it, but because you don't know it's bad, you think it's all good, it's cool, but in reality it's a sin, then you don't get saved from that. You would be committing a sin by that. The worst evil is disbelief in Allah. The worst evil is kufr. That's the worst. The rule upon which the scholars base their judgments in these cases is any belief, action, or saying which belittles Allah, His books, His prophets, His angels, His rituals, the indicators of His religion, that is, the obvious matters known to be of the religion like the prayer, the call to the prayer, adhan, and the mosque, His rules, His promise of paradise and reward, or His threat of hellfire and torture is kufr. Hence one must use caution with utmost effort to avoid these nullifiers of faith at all times. That is, the person should make the greatest effort to avoid that and be extremely careful about it, because whoever dies as a kafir loses this life and the hereafter. This is why we are so emphatic about learning the obligatory knowledge. Learn the rules of apostasy. Learn what you can say and what you can't say. Learn what you can do with your body and what you can't do with your body. Learn what you can believe in your heart and not believe in your heart. Because if you didn't know that, let's say, prostrating to an idol, right? If you didn't know that that's kufr, and somebody like supposedly did it as part of a play, or they did it like as a supposedly a prank, or their friend told them to do it and they wanted to join their friend in what they're doing, and they didn't know that doing that is blasphemy, they still blaspheme. So the danger of not knowing that you blasphemed is that you might die before you become aware that what you did was blasphemy. And if that happens, and while being accountable, then you go to hell forever. So imagine, because you left out learning, for what reason? Nowadays, there's so many ways that you can learn the obligatory knowledge. You can listen to it in your ear as you're going about your day to day. You don't have to come here right to the musalla to learn the obligatory knowledge. You can learn it 1,000 miles away, on the internet, on Zoom, on Instagram Live, on TikTok Live, on so many different platforms. Someone can call you on WhatsApp, video chat. Somebody can send you voice notes, and they can pre-record the information and send it to you. There's no excuse to not learn. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. Does anyone have any questions before we conclude?